Keith, what can we learn from metaphysics in our understanding of the natural world? Indeed, whether materialism is the right description of reality.
There is a huge distinction among philosophers and thinkers of all sorts between those who think that in the end everything is made out of matter. And you've got to be able to reduce everything, consciousness, thoughts, whatever, into material things. And then, on the other hand, people who think you can't do that, and then you get lots of possible views, but the central one would be mental events and thoughts are not reducible to matter. So after that, you've got a number of places you could go. But for me, the most compelling metaphysical theory, that is theory about the general nature of reality, what is ultimately real, would be that mental events are actually the ultimate reality out of which physical things are generated. So
that's a very strong statement.
It is,
people would call that idealism.
They would, they'd be right.
Normally, when you talk about somebody being an idealist, you think of Bishop Berkeley and something that sometimes is rather silly.
Well, Bishop Berkeley was not silly. He was odd. But you don't have to be Bishop Berkeley. And Kant, my own favourite philosopher, I have to say, was an idealist too. And he made fun of Bishop Berkeley like everybody else. So you don't have to be quite like Berkeley. But you do have to say that mind is the fundamental reality from which material things are constructions. You can see this in a way if you think about the way physicists talk about an 11-dimensional universe or a 21-dimensional universe. And you say, well, this is clearly a mental construction. Nobody's seen such a thing. Nobody could see it. You're constructing this. It's a theoretical. I'm not saying it's false, but it's certainly a theoretical construction.
Well, there's a difference because they're making a theoretical construction, but they're imagining what reality is with the physical world. If they didn't make the construction, it would still be that. If it's true, it would still be that. They don't have to make the construction to make it that.
No, but it's not a material reality. So if you have a...
Well, we say material. It's the forces of physics, it's dimensions of physics. Whatever it takes is in the natural world. Maybe the word material is not appropriate anymore in physics, but the naturalism, the natural part of the world is.
I don't think anybody knows what natural means. I've just been having a conversation with a number of naturalist philosophers. In fact, we had a conference at our college in London, and we asked the question, what is naturalism? And three eminent naturalist philosophers said, I don't quite know how to define natural. So they had the same problem as you think I have with consciousness. Okay? I was taught at a very interesting time, I won't say how long ago, by a philosopher called Gilbert Ryle and by another philosopher in the same university called Freddie Ayer. And they disagreed completely with each other about the nature of reality, about metaphysics. Although Ryle said he didn't believe in metaphysics, he still managed to have a view about it. And Ayer would say everything begins with sense data, with elements of consciousness, and you build up the physical world from this. And then you cross the road and talk to Gilbert Ryle, and he'd say, there aren't any such things as sense data, they're just illusions, really, and everything is just the way you behave, and it's publicly observable, etc. So here were two very good philosophers indeed, who disagreed totally about what things are ultimately made of. And I think that what that shows you minimally is it's a very difficult question to answer, and you can't assume that one of those views is true. And if you say which one is commonsensical, I guess neither of them is, as a matter of fact.
Now, both of those would be naturalistic views. Neither one believed in supernatural realities or the special nature of consciousness, that it's something other than the material world.
I think Ayer certainly wouldn't have, he didn't believe in God, and he wouldn't have believed in what he would call a supernatural. But of course, he did believe that conscious events, thoughts, feelings, and sense data, are not material events. So he was not a materialist. Neither was Ryle. Ryle is sometimes called a behaviorist because he thought all knowledge, has to be publicly observable. But he denied being a materialist, and Ryle thought materialism was a very crude theory indeed. In fact, when I was a student, everybody thought materialism was too silly even to take seriously in philosophy.
Well, I think that the distinction is, again, with naturalism, that they may not be materialists, but they were naturalists.
They were certainly naturalists. But then what do you mean by that? They just meant there isn't a supernatural, i.e. they didn't like God very much.
Right. Or anything spiritual, not just the Judeo-Christian God, but really anything supernatural.
I have to say, if I may tell a short story, just sitting with Gilbert Ryle in his study, and one of his great claims was you don't have mental images. There are no such things as mental images. And I was one of his last pupils. The other one was Dan Dennett, strangely enough, who is a materialist. But what Ryle said to me was, I think I was wrong about there not being mental images. Now, that doesn't mean he was wrong, but if there are mental images, you've got a serious problem if you're a behaviorist of where are these things? I mean, what is their status? Do they exist? Do they have existence? And if so, where? And that to me is quite an important argument against materialism, that we do have mental images and we do have thoughts that other people don't know about. So materialism can't give you the ultimate answer. And as I say, there are lots of places you could go with that, but to say that you construct the physical world doesn't mean that it's false. To say that you construct it out of mental events and phenomena, I think points towards the logical priority of the mental.